All right, hey everyone, how's it going? It's David from the Geek Garage podcast. This is episode number 53. That's 53 if you are talking about numbers like a normal human being. We are actually starting our first themed month today for this episode. God, we're starting out great, aren't we, Ted?
I have no comments so far.
Yeah, so we're doing our first theme month for the most part. Like an argument could be made that our first theme month was like the MTAC series, like the Road to MTAC.
Yeah,
But
or the Halloween month we did.
okay, well, like we actually plan this shit out like pretty far in advance.
None of this
Whereas like
matters. We're doing the villains theme this month.
yeah, it's all about them evil villains. This has nothing to do with the coronavirus. For those of you trying to make sense of like why evil villains or antagonists and
Yeah,
why now,
we've talked about this for a while, and then this is just sort of like
coincidence.
coincidental. Yeah.
Yeah, so it has nothing to do with that. For those of you that might try to make sense of like of that. So yeah,
Because spoiler alert, we don't make sense of anything.
right. Yeah. If you're trying to like find deeper meaning in anything that we say,
You're doing it very wrong.
right. What do they say? That path leads to madness.
Yes.
Uh,
Madness be that way.
mhm.
You're pissing up a rope, basically, in trying that.
Yes. Or into the wind, or
Yes.
both.
Into the wind, up a rope.
You, wow. Double jeopardy.
Yes.
I believe that is the technical term. Okay. Hey, how about back to the podcast?
Yes, let's do that.
All right. So before we get into the meat and taters of this shit, we have a couple things to touch on. So events. We were scheduled for a bunch of conventions that were coming down the pike this convention season. Some have been postponed, some of them have been canceled. We're going to go through those real quick. EvilCon, that was scheduled for actually last weekend as of this recording date. That has been moved to July 10th and 12th, still at the arena. I forget the name of the arena, but it's still
It's like
in
the Evansville Convention Center or something.
yeah, still in Evansville, and we still plan on doing that. MTech was supposed to be after that. It has been postponed, not yet rescheduled. MomoCon, they finally postponed that. They were holding out seriously until the
Holding out
last
hope.
second.
Yeah.
Yeah, and shit just got worse and worse and worse, and we were all just kind of like, "Are you gonna do the smart thing here,
Right.
MomoCon?" And they they finally bit the bullet and decided to postpone, and they are, I believe, as we speak, trying to find new dates. So, like I said, postponed but not yet rescheduled. Nashville Comic Con, I believe, is still set for May 30th and 31st. That hasn't been rescheduled yet. And AkaiCon has not yet been postponed or rescheduled. That is still set for July 24th through the 26th. So yes, that's a little update on the convention slash public appearances bullshit. In case you were curious, I'm sure a whole lot of you were. Haha, that's a joke. I'm sure it was none of you. Anyways, so that's pretty much all we had to get out of the way, aside from our going over the criteria for this episode series, and we have a little a couple things that pertain to books in particular, and works of fiction as far as criteria goes. But Ted, do you want to kind of take over and go over some of that criteria that we have set for our evil villains?
Sure. So since it is a month, we're going to do 4 episodes, one a week for the next 4 weeks. That may not be exactly a month, but I mean, come on, you get it. 4 weeks, that's a month. We're going to cover villains from fiction and literature, comic books, movies, and TV shows. And then our last episode will be a watch along that we have not decided on yet because we're professionals and we plan everything very, very closely.
Right.
But they'll all be themed around some of our favorite villains. Again, as we've said before, when we do episodes like this, These are not. This is not a countdown. This is not like the number 9 greatest villain in literature. It's not
Right.
like that.
We're not that special. We're
Yeah,
not that official.
we're just two dudes with opinions, just
Hmm.
like everybody else. So,
Yep.
these are some of our favorites. They're probably at least. I don't imagine that David or I either one went to like anachronistic. So I'm
No.
pretty sure that you're going to see a lot of familiar names,
Yep.
hear about a lot of familiar characters. So
Yeah, nothing's gonna be like super off the beaten path,
right,
as far as name
we're not doing
recognition.
the normal Ted thing where he gets as pretentious as possible, which
Right.
apparently rubs people the wrong way. But whatever, plebeians. We do have some.
Troglodytes.
What is this? Some kind of poor people joke? I'm too rich to understand.
Exactly.
We do have some criteria for the villains, regardless of what medium they come from.
Hmm.
And the number one thing we settled on is that they have to be actively choosing to be a villain, right? So
Right.
there are a lot of characters that are portrayed as antagonists, but are just doing like what they do, so to speak. So, like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, for example, they're not making an active choice to be a villain, they're just being dinosaurs.
Although,
Zombies.
although if there is like an evil dinosaur movie out there, please fucking tell me about
Tell
it
me,
because
because I need that in my fucking
I
life.
right, like a dinosaur, like a T-Rex with a fucking laser on its head. Like, sorry, I just saw Austin Powers last night, but like I need a T-Rex with like a fucking laser beam or like rigged a shotgun to where like his tiny arms could use it. Like that
Right.
would be amazing. Like I need that shit in my life.
12 gauge T Rex. I'm so about that.
We should write that script.
We should. But God damn it. Back to the criteria.
Yeah.
Things like zombies from any number of different things.
Right.
They're just like brainless death machines.
Yeah.
Jaws is another good example of just like it's a shark. You're doing what
Right.
sharks do. So the
Yeah.
number one criteria that we wanted, number one criterion, I should say, that we wanted was that it had to be an active choice to commit villainy or to pursue evil intentions or what have you.
Right.
Other than that, we kept it pretty free flowing. Um, we didn't want to sort of pigeonhole ourselves too much where it's like they have to do this or that or be this. As long as it's an active choice, again, to pursue evil intentions or to be villainous, then that was good enough for us. Again, we're not authorities on anything. We're just two idiots with a podcast. So,
Right.
you know,
We should change the name to like elbows and assholes.
yes.
To just to name them after our like pointless opinions that pretty much only you and I care about, and that's putting it.
To be fair, I don't care that much. So,
I don't even care about my own opinion.
right. My opinions are trash and I hate them.
Right. And with that said, let's get rolling with our opinions.
Yeah, yes. Well, not
do,
quite.
do we have more criteria to go over?
No, but we should kind of go over what we're going to do for each episode, the format and whatnot.
Oh yeah, sure, why not?
So we're going to do these kind of round robin style. Dave and I will just go back and forth naming our picks, going over what work they're from or works they're from, why we like that character, and why they're effective at being a villain, as well as some other kind of potpourri things that here I may have thought of. As always, I'm going to go ahead and throw a big spoiler warning at the beginning of this. There are probably going to be some instances on all of these episodes where we talk about a villain and go into something that they have done that is considered a spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to throw out a giant warning right here, as well as individual warnings if we remember them as we are about to talk about spoilery things.
We'll do our best.
But again, idiots with a podcast, so don't expect much.
Yes, right. Exactly.
So this first episode that Dave and I agreed on is going to be about fiction and literature, so books, those things that
Yes.
old people read or that you
Right.
can read on the pads now.
And with that, Ted, do you have anything else?
No, I think we should hit the music and get this shit show on the road.
All right. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get this started. Some of you may not know this, but before Fight Club was a movie, it was a book for a few years. It was a book first, Once again, books are those things where like words are printed on paper and then bound. But yes, I chose Tyler Durden as my first villain. Like I said from the book, Fight Club author Chuck Palahniuk. I think it. Ted, is that the way you pronounce his name? Is it Palahniuk?
Yeah, I
Palahniuk?
believe it's Palahniuk.
Okay. I always question myself when it comes to saying his name because I always figured I'm going to say it wrong, like most things in my life. Anyways, that's not what we're here to talk about. So, why I like them. I like Tyler Durden as a villain or antagonist because he doesn't fit the role of villain like straight out the gate. Like when you're first introduced to, well, I mean, the intro aside, like when it kind of does the Tarantino thing where it shows you the end and then it gets to the beginning. When they kind of first meet on the plane, you know, it kind of eases him in as like Mr. Cool Guy, and then slowly but surely he seems kind of fucking crazy with these weird ideas.
Turns to kind of a dick.
Yeah, he is. He's a little bit of a dick, isn't he?
A
He's
douche canoe, as the
right.
children say.
Is that what the churns say?
I have no idea. I'm not a children.
Okay, well, I mean, I like douche canoe,
Good
and
one.
I think I'm going to use that from now on. But yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to pick him. As I thought the fact that he kind of started out as this like cool, almost envious character, because that's who he is in this book. He's kind of the flip of our narrator's character. Like he's everything. He's the perfect complement to his character. He fucks the way he wants to fuck. He talks the way he wants to talk. He's everything that he's not. But like I said, to the extent where it ends up getting people killed, and like literally. Um, and with that, I'll kind of dive into why I think he is an effective villain. Um, he kind of has that, not kind of, he definitely has that level of narcissism that we we typically see with a lot of villains that are of human nature, I guess, like that take human form, even though we are kind of talking about a villain that is kind of sort of, but maybe not
Spoiler
really.
alert.
Right. Although if you haven't like either read or watched Fight Club by this point, like may God have mercy on your soul. Um,
Yeah, they're probably not going to at this point if they haven't already.
yeah. But yeah, he definitely has, and I mean I don't want to go into too much detail or talk about Tyler Durden too much because I felt like we kind of beat it to death when we did our Fight Club episode back in, what was that, like the fall or
September.
yeah. Uh, so yeah, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on him, but yeah, like I said, he definitely has that level of narcissism where he feels like everything that he does is for the greater good, and nothing that he thinks of is wrong, and it's to the point where he gets people in trouble, gets people hurt, uh gets people killed. And he also has that like grand plan, like that Thanos grand plan to like course correct society or the world or whatever grand scale that you want to think of. Like he has that idea or that plan that's going to like reset the clocks back to zero and give everyone a fresh clean slate, but it comes at a cost that when you think of it you're like, that's maybe a step or like 15 too far in the wrong direction. So yeah, but like I said, I don't want to dive too deep into him because we did kind of beat him to death. So if you want to hear more about mine and as well as Ted's thoughts on Tyler Durden and the rest of Fight Club, I guess just on at the movie level, we didn't really talk too much about the book except for the ending during that episode. Isn't that right, Ted?
The book came up a few times, but we definitely did just focus on the movie.
Yeah, yeah. That's right, because we were talking about it because it celebrated its 20th
Yeah,
anniversary.
yeah,
Or
20th.
yeah. So yeah, Ted, you want to go ahead with your first book?
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I want to kind of touch on Durden
Yeah.
for a second. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Of he somewhat has the transformation from like anti-hero almost to straight up villain,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And it still fits our criteria though because he does actively choose, and like you said, he has that master plan, so to speak. So that's a good pick, I think.
Hmm. Yeah.
My first pick is Professor Moriarty from the Sherlock Holmes universe, written by Arthur Conan Doyle.
Very sophisticated.
Okay, all right.
I bet you have many leather-bound books, and your apartment smells of
I
rich
literally
mahogany.
have the complete Sherlock Holmes mysteries in a leather-bound volume.
You would.
Yeah. Yes.
That's pretty dope, though.
Yeah, I do. It's sick. Um, but yeah, I this is one of my all-time favorite villains in any medium. It's Holmes' greatest villain for sure. I love the way he's described in the books. He's called Holmes calls him the Napoleon of crime, and says he's basically like the spider sitting motionless in the center of the web, waiting for some fool to stumble in.
Yikes.
Yeah, that's just a great image of the character and what he's willing to do, and um, it, it's really it's really strange to me that in some ways that he's remembered the way he is because Moriarty is a great villain. He's the equal to Holmes. He's almost like the other side of the coin from Holmes.
Hmm.
Whereas Holmes uses his immense intellect for good, Moriarty chooses a dark path. He engages in. He's basically like the mob boss for all of Europe. I think it's basically how he's spoken of. Holmes at another point says that he Moriarty is basically the reason for all the shady antics that go on in the city of London, as well as kind of expounds that to England and to mainland Europe.
Hmm.
What's really funny though is that the character is remembered as Holmes's main antagonist when that's not really the case at all. He was only invented so that the author could kill off Sherlock Holmes because he got sick of writing about him and he wanted to write other things. But
Wow.
Holmes was so popular, he was like, "I'll never get out of it unless I kill him." So he created Moriarty, who did kill Holmes, famously, and then he realized, oh shit, I still got to sell books. Nobody gives a fuck what I got to say other than Sherlock Holmes. So he did bring Holmes back, of course, but like I said, Moriarty is just a great character. And a quick shout out, he also, as with a lot of the Holmes, mythos, has appearances elsewhere. One of my favorites is from the Star Trek: The Next Generation episode "Elementary, Dear Data," where Data and Geordi go on a holodeck Holmes like adventure,
Right.
and the character of Moriarty, the computer program of Moriarty, basically becomes sentient and like tries to take over the Enterprise. It's dumb fun, but
Jeez.
it's just a great little episode there. So
Yeah. When you said Star Trek, I was like, wait, what? But
yeah,
then I was like, what the fuck? But then I
yeah,
remembered the whole holodeck thing.
yeah,
And yeah, so that makes sense.
yeah. And like I said, I mean, he's the basically the opposite of Holmes, which is what makes him an effective villain. Like he goes toe to toe with the greatest detective ever and wins, basically. So
Right.
what else can you say? What else do you need to say?
So I think I was in like middle school. I was pretty young, and I went to the Mount Juliet Public Library, and I asked the librarian to find Sherlock Holmes for me, and she found it. I checked it out, brought it home, and I got to like page 3, and I was like, I know some of these words. It was I'm pretty sure it was like not within my grade level. And in fact, I think that's what the librarian said. Like she just looked at me and like I think I took a little personally, but she was like, I think this is a little bit out of your grade level, out of your reading level, uh, uh, but I can't prohibit you from renting
Right.
this fucking book. So yeah, she let me dig my own grave. I took it home, tried to read it, and I was like, I don't fucking get any of it. Um, so yeah, eh, maybe I'll understand a little bit more nowadays. I think my reading level has increased a little bit since then. So maybe I should give it a try.
Yeah, I mean, you can find like I said, the complete works of Holmes or of Doyle. The Complete Adventures of Holmes by Doyle should be available in a fairly cheap collection.
Right.
I've seen them around before. There's different collections. There's like the complete collection. Then there's, I think it's the Case Book of Sherlock Holmes, which was, I believe, the first collection of short stories, or maybe the first novel and some short stories. But they're definitely available pretty widely, so you should be able to find them.
All right. Cool. Yeah, I'll add it to my ever growing reading list. Just like movies, it never gets any
Never
shorter.
ends.
It just gets longer and longer, and
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about books is that they lead to other books.
yeah. Um, but anyways, you have anything else to say on Sherlock Holmes before we push forward?
Other than it's the greatest, no, that's all I have to say.
Right on. So my next book, or next villain, is Alex. I don't think he has a last name, but he's from a
Uh,
Clockwork Orange.
Burgess? Or no, that's Anthony Burgess wrote it.
Yeah, the author is Anthony Burgess. He wrote A Clockwork Orange, and the villain's name is, like I said, Alex. I don't think he has a last name. Like
He
I
does,
looked.
and I'll remember it or I will look it up.
All right. Well,
So you
you
keep
do that.
clacking on and I'll.
Right on.
It's the large.
Shit. I think I knew that.
Yeah.
Why the fuck did, like, I googled this shit earlier. It just said Alex. Whatever.
Well,
Apparently my
so you're right. In the book, it's just Alex. In the movie, it's DeLarge
Oh, okay.
because he
That's
calls himself in the novel. He calls himself Alex the Large, which is you
right.
HD motherfuckers.
Right, yeah. That's probably why I didn't find it, because I actively sought out information about Clockwork Orange the book, because just like my first book choice, which was then turned into a movie, this was also a book that was turned into a movie, like most books nowadays. But yeah, so I like Alex from A Clockwork Orange as a villain. This isn't, so I like him because he's kind of like the opposite of Tyler Durden from my previous choice. He starts out like he starts out the main character, or he is the main character of the book, but he starts out the bad guy, and he kind of finds at least partial redemption by the end. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say that he's like, he ends up being the good guy at the end, and I won't throw any spoilers out there, unless you would consider that a spoiler. But Ted, I think you'd agree with me that he's pretty fucking evil throughout most of the book up until pretty much the middle of like the third act. Um,
Yeah, yeah. He's I
and
I almost picked this as one of mine, this
okay,
character, but I couldn't. What stopped me is I couldn't decide which iteration to choose from, the book or the film, and I was gonna pick the film, and then I was like,
uh,
nah, we'll come back to it. I may still,
okay,
but now since you've picked him for the book, I probably won't. But
sure.
I like the character a lot. I like the universe a lot.
Hmm.
Um, there are so many good, like, I've talked about this before with like Mad Max. I look at things like the language and the dialogue, and there are so many great instances of that in A Clockwork Orange, like ultra
God, yeah.
violence and old droog, and just like all these like different sounding words. And you're like, oh, like
Yeah, yeah, you're almost like, you wonder if you're missing out on a whole nother dialect, because this is he was a British author, I believe, and
yes,
this takes place
it's
in
set in
Europe,
Britain. Yeah,
right? Whereas like, or did he actually come up with this terminology, like this milk laced with like acid
yeah,
and fucking droogs
Milk
and shit?
Plus. Yeah,
Right? Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's really weird, this world that he kind of created, where you're like exactly what part of this is actually real, and what is not. But yeah, I think he was pretty effective, because Alex embodies a lot of the really bad qualities that you find in a lot of like troubled young people or troubled youth, like and men in particularly. And I'm not trying to get all political or anything. I'm just throwing it out there that like, troubled youth, if they don't find stability and someone to like be like, hey, that's not cool, like, beating the shit out of people, that's something that we don't do, and then you like kind of course correct their path to enlightenment. That's kind of what happens to Alex, is that there's really no one there for him to be like, hey bro, we don't break into people's houses,
And beat them
t-
with canes.
right, beat the husbands with a cane, have your buddies hold him down while you rape their wife.
That's a bad look.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of why I thought he was a really effective villain, is because he, like, that's something that could actually happen. Like, I think this, for the most part, this is on my book list of villains. This is like the only like human, like pure 100% like human iteration of a villain. Like everything else is kind of, touch and go, but like this is shit that could actually happen, and I think that's what makes him, effective. That, and like total lack of empathy for other people, and the inability up into a certain point in the book to objectively look at the things that he's done and see that they are wrong on pretty much every level.
They are in
uh,
fact dick moves.
I would go so far as to say that everything that he does is pretty much a dick move, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. But yeah, I read this book. I don't know what my teacher was thinking when he agreed to like let me read this in in high school. It was for my British literature class, and he just like, the criteria was basically pick a pick a British author, and pick one of their books and write a report. Like, read the book, obviously, and write a report. And like, I had seen A Clockwork Orange a few times with a buddy who owned it, and I was just like, well, I've been wanting to read the book, so this would be a good opportunity. But I never in a million fucking years thought that my teacher would agree to let me read this. One, because it's high school, like, this book is insane. I mean, it's even more insane than the movie. And two, like, I went to a Catholic high school, so he had all the more reason to say like, are you out of your goddamn mind? Um, but no, like, he seriously, like, I turned it in. He gave me the approval, and I was like, what the fuck? And then like, he caught up with me one day at lunch, and he was like, hey, I really respect your choice for the book you chose to do your report on. I'm really looking forward to reading it. And I was like, what the fuck is going on here? So yeah, that's just another little side story that you didn't ask for, but I thought it was kind of entertaining.
Yeah,
Uh,
I read that in high school as well. I was a
oh yeah.
sophomore.
Uh-huh.
And I remember vividly, like, I had it on my desk in my geology class, and the teacher came by and was like, he looked at it and he looked at me and he was just like, "They let you check this out?"
They didn't have this in the restricted section.
Right. He was like, "That's kind of a heavy book," and I was like, "Yep."
Well, I'm a heavy dude instead of
Oh, fat
a
joke.
fat
How
joke. How
gauche.
gauche.
How gauche. Moving right along.
Yeah. What's your next book, kind sir?
My next villain is Lady Macbeth from Shakespeare's Macbeth.
Yes,
Okay.
actually,
All right.
indubitably.
Well, um, the reason I like this character so much is I've said this before, probably on the podcast, definitely in conversation. Like, to me, Macbeth is basically like the pinnacle of human achievement with regards to the written word.
Hmm.
Um,
Pretty good.
it's just basically unfuckwithable, as the children say. I like the character of Lady Macbeth because she's the brains of the operation. She is the one that really sets the story in motion. I mean, it's about Macbeth killing the king to become the king, but she's the one that gives him the idea.
Hmm.
So without her, or with a different lady we basically are robbed of that story. Which, so thank you in a way, I suppose, for killing this king so
Thank you for
quickly.
your guidance.
Yes. But she's just such a rich and complex character. She starts out as, very ambitious and is like, yes, we should definitely do this. And then by the end, she's driven mad, and we're led to believe that she kills herself. I think it by her hand, swift and violently, is how it's described in the text. But she's just a great representation of so many different themes and kind of a couple of different parables. So there's like the "Be careful what you wish for," where she's like, "Hey, if we kill this guy, then you'll become king and everything will be great." And that's nope, not what
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of critics that are much smarter than I am have also noted that there is a certain representative struggle with gender norms in historical society. So women are expected to be compassionate, whereas men are expected to be ambitious, and she's definitely more ambitious. Hence she
Right.
tells her husband to kill the king. Um, and they've gone on to say that she sort of represents the anti-mother, in the sense of, rather than try to be nurturing and compassionate, she's just like, kill that motherfucker. And as described almost as like sort of in a way, like the prototypical witch type character. So
Sure.
just a very rich character overall. You know, um, I really can't say enough. Like I said, there are so many iterations of Macbeth, from plays to movies to television movies to everything. That there have been so many good instances, so many amazing and wonderful actresses have portrayed Lady Macbeth. Um, that basically you throw a stone and you've hit four great adaptations of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and they all bring something a little bit different to the character, which is always great as well.
Right. Yeah, I actually, when I started exploring Shakespeare, it was again for school, but it was an actual assignment. Like first, we had to read. It was like my freshman English class, and we had to read Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And I was like, cool. Well, I've been wanting to read Shakespeare for a long time. I wanted to read Romeo and Juliet, and we read it, and I was like, well, I mean, I kind of already knew what happened, so it was just kind of an underwhelming experience overall. And then in when I was a sophomore, we read Macbeth, and I remember being blown the fuck away. I was like, "Whoa! Like, is this what it's actually about?" So I side with you with this being just a classic fucking masterpiece.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I had a pretty similar experience with Shakespeare in high school. I think probably a lot of people have. I read this book actually, called "How Shakespeare Changed Everything" by Stephen Marsh,
Hmm.
um, which I definitely recommend. It's a pretty quick read. It's not very long, and it's not super difficult to read. It's not like a graduate thesis in Shakespeare. It's definitely
Sure,
like a quote unquote like popular sort of book.
sure, like a consumer level
Yeah, like a
book.
like a pop history sort of book.
Sure.
Definitely interesting, and it really changed my perspective on Romeo and Juliet, where it's like people have gotten it wrong. Like it's about teenagers, and I was like, oh my god, it just like clicked for me where it was. But yeah, I mean, Shakespeare in some circles has kind of fallen out of favor, which is dumb. I kind of get it, but it's
Hmm.
still dumb. There are so many great adaptations. So if you're not comfortable, or if reading the old plays makes you feel stupid, because like you said, David, there are a lot of like period language.
Yeah, a
It's
lot.
it's not like updated to where we'd understand it. Plus, it's very poetic. On top of that,
Right.
and there's a lot of metaphor and things like that. So
Yeah, I think there should be some collections out there of Shakespearean work where they have like footnotes on each
yeah,
page that break down what the language means, like the
definitely. There are there
Shakespearean
are
language.
there are like quote unquote translations, if you will,
Right.
where it's
Yeah.
it's written in like an updated way.
Sure. Yeah.
There's a lot of different movies out there that are sort of anachronistic, where they're set in like modern times, or
Hmm.
when the movie was released, what would be considered modern times, like the Romeo and Juliet that I think Baz Luhrmann did with Leonardo DiCaprio,
Yep.
um, as well as there was a Hamlet that was sort of set in a contemporary time and changed a little bit for that time. That was
Are you talking about the Lion King?
no, um, I'm I'm not, although basically it is the poor man's Hamlet.
Right. It's Hamlet with animals.
In a way, it's real. Well, it's not. It's we're not trying to get into a rabbit hole with this, but
Yeah.
it definitely has some similarities.
Yeah.
But there have been so many great adaptations. Back to Macbeth, so many great adaptations. My personal favorite is one that PBS did 10 or 12 years ago, starring Sir Patrick Stewart as
Mm,
Macbeth.
okay.
There was also a very good movie from 2015 that I believe Justin Kurzel directed, just called Macbeth, starring Michael Fassbender
Right. Yeah, I remember
as
that.
Macbeth, and I believe it was Marion Cotillard as Lady Macbeth, and she is fantastic.
Oh yeah, she's pretty much great in everything that I've seen.
Yes, except
So
when she dies in The Dark Knight Rises, which is so fucking amusing to me.
yeah, that is kind of amusing.
She hates that take, by the way. Like she was like, she said this in interviews that she hates it so much, and like she hates Christopher Nolan for using it.
Yeah, well, no one's
What are
perfect.
you gonna do?
Yeah.
Anyway, David, I think it's your next.
All right, so for my next book, I chose The Exorcist, and the evil villain is, I guess, the demon or a demon or the devil or
I
a
believe
devil.
that it is Pazuzu.
Is
In the
that the
movie, it's Pazuzu. I have not read the book, so I don't know if they changed that for the film or not. But in the
I was
film,
when I was doing my research earlier, I was actually looking, of course, at the book version, but I was looking for keywords such as Captain Howdy. Um, I was like, wait, was that the? I know that Captain Howdy came up in the movie, but was that the term that was actually used in the book as well? I couldn't remember. So I put down the devil that does or demon that does the possessing,
mm,
obviously. But of course, it was written by William Peter Blatty. It's Blatty, right? Or
yes,
Blade? I always thought it was Blady,
I
but
think it's Blatty.
yeah. But when I talked to my grandma about that, who my grandma is a fucking rock star. Her and I like go on about books like nobody's business. She gives me all kinds of cool recommendations, but out of all books, we had a really cool discussion about this a while back about The Exorcist, and she said William Peter Blatty, and I was like, oh, is that how you say his name? I always thought it was Blatty. Anyways, so why I liked this particular villain, uh I picked it because it was actually one of the first that I thought of when we were coming up with villains for books, and I thought of it because it like literally scared the shit out of me when I was reading it. Like I haven't read a whole lot of like classic horror books. I mean, and I'm using the term classic kind of loosely, but classic in terms of like, it's meant to be scary. It's not like it's not a thriller. It's not like horror slash satire, kind of like um, some of Chuck Palahniuk's works. But yeah, it was pretty much the first horror genre book that I read, and like as much as it scared the shit out of me, like I could not put it down, and like I had already seen the movie several times, so I knew pretty much what was happening, and as far as I can remember, the book for the most part lines up pretty decently with the movie. Uh, but yeah, like I just remember it just scaring the shit out of me in all the best ways possible. So I had to pick this. I know, like I said, it kind of loosely fits the criteria that we set. Um, I guess an argument could be made that since it's the devil and the or a demon, and that's what a demon is supposed to do is possess people and be evil. But I don't know. I just had to throw it in there. And I thought it was an effective villain because like it's literally the fucking devil.
Right. It's
um,
funny. I actually thought about picking the devil. But there's like so many different iterations that I was like I would be doing a disservice if I narrowed it down to like one. So
right.
I was like, do I pick like Dante's Inferno? Do I pick like Paradise Lost? Like
Hmm.
I was just like, you know what, we're just gonna leave it off the list because it's like it's too much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was definitely much easier for me to come up with it in terms of books. But yeah, one last thing about them being an effective villain. is that like it's in my opinion, it's like the most frightening iteration of possession that I've at least read. You know, and I've read a couple, but this is definitely the scariest shit. You know, and like it definitely lends itself the advantage of being a book instead of a movie where you know movies you're especially when the exorcist the movie was filmed you know you're definitely limited to what you're physically capable of doing in terms of effects. But with books, like the literally the sky's the limit. Like, you know, whatever you can come up with in your own imagination is what your limit is. And I think that is part of that's what uh, that's part of what made this such an effective villain for me is just like the fact that I was sitting there knowing that like what the movie version looks like. Um, I was just imagining something so much deeper and crazier than but you know then again I'm kind of a messed up dude. That's another story.
Yeah, I could dig it.
I don't know.
But,
Have you ever read The Exorcist?
no,
Okay.
no, I have not.
Well, you should check it out. You could
It will go on the ever-growing list that we talked about.
I mean, it's from what I remember, it's a little big, but I don't know, maybe like 300 pages. But like, I remember getting through it in like a week, maybe a week or two.
Hmm.
So you could probably breeze through it in like 3 hours. Um,
I don't know about that exactly.
I mean, well, I mean, you're a pretty fast reader, so. Uh, but yeah, so yeah, what's your next book, villain?
My last, um, my last one that I want to go over, my last villain I want to go over is Count Dracula. Um, the reason that I chose Dracula from Bram Stoker's novel rather than one of the many portrayals in a film is because this one's better. And the reason it's better is because it's just the brutality and the true evil of this iteration is so much more extreme than any of especially any of the famous iterations of the character of Dracula. So the one that everybody points to, of course, is like Bela Lugosi, who's like suave and sophisticated and debonair, and he's still a vampire, but he's like a count. You know, he's like a role person. Whereas this one is just like he's hideous and horrifying, and like pretty early in the novel, like kidnaps a baby to feed to one of his like vampire wives. It's just
Right,
like from the word go, this fucking thing is just like evil personified.
right,
Um, does a lot of crazy, terrible shit. Um, whereas, you know, I don't want to say that the other iterations of Dracula are not scary or not evil, but like this one is going for broke from the start, which is why I think it's a more effective characterization of Dracula as well as like a more effective villain
hmm
because there's none of this like um, limp dicking around, you know, like he's not just like trying to be clever and oh I want to suck your blood and no, he's just like here eat a baby shut the fuck up.
he
He
does
just
he
he goes
doesn't
hard.
sparkle in the sun.
Yeah, no, he goes hard 100% of the time.
Right,
Um, but I mean, like, what kind of? It's fucking Count Dracula. Like, what do I need to say? You know what I mean?
right. You need to say Dracula musical.
Like, die.
Die,
I
die.
can't.
I can't.
Yeah.
Great fucking movie.
Yes.
I tried to make a case that we should do that for a watch along. I don't know if any comedy would be good for a watch along, but
It
I
would basically just be us laughing for an hour and a half, and I don't think anybody wants to hear that.
hey, like you know, people could watch along with us and laugh along with us. Uh, but you know, like I said, it's I don't know how entertaining that would be. Maybe some, but probably none. But anyways, I'll go ahead and or were you done, Ted?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, don't get cute. Like, what the fuck? What do I need to say about Count Dracula? You know, like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So I think so. I got one last villain, And this is actually probably the only one that, Ted, I don't believe you'll really have anything to speak to this villain because you have not read these books, unless you somehow read all of them without my knowledge recently. But I am talking about Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, author J.K. Rowling. That's, of course, no surprise. Everyone knows who the fuck J.K. Rowling is. But I chose Umbridge because, as a one shot side villain, she is fucking top notch. And I've heard many arguments made uh, successfully that she is like 10 times fucking worse than Voldemort. Uh, they're pretty damn convincing. And I'll kind of get into a few of those now. Looking at her and what she does to like all the students, in particular Harry, like makes you question like if Voldemort even has what it fucking takes to hate Harry Potter. Dolores can't produce a Patronus charm, which is what the charm that wizards and witches make to fend off evil and evil spirits. And what you need to, in order to produce a Patronus charm, aside from lots and lots of practice, is happy memories to dwell on. Because that's how you fight off evil spirits, is thinking of things in your life that are good, that you can fall back on. And she doesn't have any of those, so she can't produce a fucking Patronus charm.
Bummer.
Yeah, it's very sad for her. Also, some of the hardest shit I've ever fucking read. She like so she sentences Harry to detention like in her own personal office, where she has to like Harry comes and uses her own quill to write I will not tell lies like 50 million times. But this quill like takes as he writes, it cuts into the skin in his hand and writes with his own blood. So as he's writing, it's like cutting into his hand, and using his own blood as ink, which is like the hardest shit that I've ever heard of. Um, and I think just that reason alone qualifies her as like one of the most evil fucking villains I've ever read about. Uh, but you know, Harry Potter lore aside, um, it's I like her as an effective villain because I saw it as a representation of how scary it can get when you look at a person or persons who refuse to be pragmatic in their viewpoints when necessary. Um, she the one of the main things in the book and movie was that like she, amongst others, but her in particular, didn't want to admit that Voldemort or Tom Riddle was back, and killing people again. And yeah, she didn't want to hear it. And Harry saw him in action firsthand, and she refused to hear any any proof that he could be right. And to me, it was kind of terrifying to think about like and apply it to real life situations, when like like it's, once again, not to get like too political, but when you hear people, especially in high power positions, who like don't want to use fucking logic to make decisions, or uh be pragmatic, and let like different viewpoints come into their brain and be like, oh, let's think about this, let's think about that, let's weigh the options, blah blah blah. So just that personality trait, I thought was um kind of on the terrifying side, because it was a little bit more realistic, of the villainous traits that she had, aside from the ones that kind of particularly pertain to the lore in Harry Potter. So, yeah, sorry, I kind of went off on a little bit of a thing
No,
there, but
no, that's okay. I mean, while I'm not familiar really with
mm,
that level, at least with Harry Potter, I do know about this character because it is a very popular person to complain about in terms of being an effective villain. Well, I guess celebrate in terms of being an effective villain and complain about as being just a terrible bitch of a character.
yes.
um,
It-
I know that Stephen King has said that he thinks Dolores Umbridge is like the best written villain in literature since Hannibal Lecter. So that's pretty
oh
high
yeah.
praise.
Yeah, I remember reading that. I totally forgot that he said that, but I remember when closely after this book came out, I think it was when he made that statement at some point in time, and I was like, well, that is high praise from a, as we've discussed a few times, a master of horror, um, which actually I don't. Yeah, our Stephen King didn't actually make our list. Any of our list.
I have one of
Oh,
his
you got.
characters as an honorable mention.
All right. Well, I guess that's a pretty decent segue into some honorable mentions.
Yes. All right. So for honorable mentions, I did have a few that did not make my top three for one reason or another. The first is Ahab from Moby Dick.
Mm.
The reason for that is because while I think it's rather obvious that he's the villain of the story, a lot of other people will point to it being the whale, which is incorrect. The villain is Ahab and egomania and hubris. Um, but just super effective, great read. Like I said this 1,000 times before, like Moby Dick is the great American novel, and anybody who tells you differently is lying to you. Next up, I have these two sort of go together in my mind. Big Brother from 1984, as well as the World State from Brave New World. Two repressive regimes in the case of Big Brother who, control your thoughts with thought crimes, things like that. The World State from Brave New World who literally break humans out into um, a hierarchy of alphas and tiered people so that there are like literal elites and then there are literal like bottom rung
Hmm.
people.
Right.
Jekyll and Hyde from Jekyll and Hyde,
Oh,
obviously.
good call.
Um, they're both kind of the villain. Hyde is more obviously like the evil personified, but just to be dealing with that, you have to be villainous. So Jekyll slash Hyde, they're both kind of on the list for me. One that I believe you have in a way, I have Doctor Frankenstein.
Okay.
Um, I I thought about the creature, but really the creature is only the way he is because he has the brain of a murderer. Whereas
Yep.
without Frankenstein, the doctor, there is no creature. So I
Yeah.
went with Doctor Frankenstein. So I may have stolen some of your thunder there. If I did, I apologize.
Nope. Nope. Not at all. I actually actually was that the end of your honorable mentions?
I actually have two others. I
Okay, go
realize now
ahead.
I should have done that one last. I'm sorry.
No, no, it's all right. I'll kind of we'll loop back around and I'll tack on some thoughts to Frankenstein, whatever you're done.
Okay, so my last two, real quick. Judge Holden from Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian.
Mm,
Cormac McCarthy is probably most famous for No Country for Old Men or The Road. I
mhm.
think Blood Meridian is probably his best work, and Judge Holden is probably the most evil character he's ever written. I can't imagine him writing someone more evil than that, and I hope that he doesn't attempt it, to be honest with you.
Right.
Um,
Cause yeah, if you thought Anton Chigurh was a fucking psychopath, yeah,
yeah, Judge Holden is like fucking next level scary evil.
yikes.
And then Annie Wilkes from Misery by Stephen
Oh
King.
yeah,
Um,
good call.
she is like the prototypical stalker fan that turns out is way worse than even that. So, um,
Yeah,
and while I think that I'm cheating here because I think that Kathy Bates' portrayal of Annie Wilkes in the film is better. Um, I knew she wasn't going to make my list for film, so I went ahead and put the character here.
sure. That's
Because while I do think the portrayal is better, I think that in some ways she's more evil in this. Because in the book, she cuts off the author's foot with an axe, whereas in the movie, she just breaks it with a sledgehammer. So I feel like
ah.
cutting it off is more evil. You know?
Uh, yeah, I suppose an argument could be made either way, but yeah, I mean, depending on the severity of the hit with the sledgehammer. I mean, you can't grow another foot,
It's
so
true.
yeah. So yeah, was that it?
Yes, thus endeth the list.
Yeah, those were definitely great honorable mentions, and I know of some of those people. I definitely want to check out that Cormac McCarthy book. What did you say the title of that book was?
It's called Blood Meridian or The Evening Redness in the West.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed No Country for Old Men. It was a relatively, easy read, which is good for me. Um, but I'm not sure if all of his works are like that, or a lot of them, but yeah, I've definitely been meaning to check out more, so I'll add that to my list as well. But yeah, looping back around to Frankenstein. So Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I originally had this on like my list, like this was going to be it. And as I was taking notes and coming up with like why I like them as a villain and why they're an effective villain, I actually talked myself out of using them because like as I the the more I tried to make it a case for them being a villain, the less I found. So it just turned out to be I couldn't really make it fit the criteria quite like I wanted it to, but I did figure that I could put it in the honorable mentions as as like, hey, it didn't quite meet the criteria that we set, but it was still pretty good. I but a little dissimilar from what you stated. I kind of extended the quote unquote villain to more of like an abstract idea or like an embodiment of evil, and like extending it to both Dr. Frankenstein as well as his creature or monster. I know that's kind of a philosophical choice between readers. Some people call it a creature, some people call it a monster. I personally call it a creature, which was one of the driving forces with me finally deciding that this was not quite didn't quite deserve to be on the evil villains like hard list. Um, but yeah, I did still feel like it was worth mentioning, just because between Dr. Frankenstein and the creature, some crazy bad shit goes down. But it's definitely more of like, you know, Doc, Dr. Frankenstein. He creates the monster. He didn't realize at the time that he's creating something that's going to be fucking horrifying. He just kind of dives into his work to keep himself busy from thinking about the terrible shit that's happening in his life. And then things go awry, and then it's a cause and effect kind of situation, if you will. But yeah, after that is the only other honorable mention I had was the book Haunted, and it's every single one of the writers on the writers retreat. And I actually won't go into spoiler territory for this because I feel that strongly that like people should read this book. Unless you have a very weak stomach, then don't read this book. And Ted, I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, I did read this book when I was in college, and I will agree that it is not the easiest to read.
Yeah, it's definitely not. No, I I think a lot of people either in high school or college had to read Guts, which is probably the most popular short story from this book. Like there's an overarching uh, plot to the movie, or to sorry the book, where these writers they all respond to an ad that this very wealthy man put out, that hey, like, I'm having a writer's retreat, sending out a bus, get on the bus, we're going to this luxurious place, we're going to have a writer's retreat. And it turns out that it's like this old rundown dilapidated like theater that's been shut down. And he locks him in there for like 3 months and tells him to get cracking. And Things are okay at first, and then all of a sudden they're not so great. Like I said, can't really talk about too much, or else I'll get into spoilers. And let's just say things get pretty gross. Um,
Yes, to put it
uh,
mildly.
right. To put it very mildly, things get pretty gross. But I love the format of this book. I know I'm not really mentioning anything about like the actual quote unquote villain. Um, but the format of this book is really cool with the, like I said, the overarching plot, plus like each of the writers, like they have their own short story, and I believe that short story that they tell within the book is the essay that they submitted to get qualified for this writers retreat in the book. I may have that backwards or incorrect, but I think I think that's right. But yeah, basically every single one of these writers is a giant piece of shit.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and they're
accurate.
yeah they're not so much evil as just like really bad fucking humans that are willing to do some crazy shit for recognition. And I think I'm just gonna leave it at that because yeah, if you're into fucked up work like Stephen King and I don't know, pretty much any other novel that we have mentioned here on this episode of the podcast, I think you'd probably dig it. Like I said, it's definitely on the more grody, gruesome side, but that's the kind of shit that I'm into. So
It's
uh,
nasty.
yeah. Also, it's by Chuck Palahniuk. Sorry, I don't think I mentioned that. Um, he's one of my favorite contemporary authors. So obviously he made it on my list a few times, and I couldn't warrant putting two Chuck Palahniuk books on my list. So yeah. But anyways, Ted, what else we got anything else?
No, just be on the lookout for our next episode on villains
Yeah,
next week, where we'll be doing comic books.
comics. Yeah,
Yeah,
comic books.
yeah.
Yes, more things with words, but with pictures this time.
Yes.
Yeah. This one is kind of scary because I haven't. Comic books are pretty new to me, as I've stated on this podcast a few times. But I'll definitely be doing my research. I'm trying to hit the comic books as much as humanly possible so I can come up with some good villains. But yeah, that like Ted said, that is our next episode coming down the pike. We hope you enjoyed this one. Once again, thank you to everyone on Facebook and other social media that participated in our back and forth on finding out who your favorite villains are. All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for us for this episode. Like always, please check us out on social media, our website, geekgaragepodcast.com, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Go subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. Leave us a rating and review. We like those kinds of things. Helps us out when people say nice things. If you don't have anything nice to say,
Lie.
uh either lie or like if you do leave us like a 1-star rating and review, like I'm definitely
Just make
curious
it
to
funny.
know.
Yeah.
Right. And it's definitely warranted because we're not good.
No. No. In fact, the opposite. But
Like
if you're gonna tell us the truth, at least either A, make us laugh, or B, give us some fucking advice. All right.
right, like point us in the right direction, be like, hey numbnuts, like focus up here, I'm gonna need you to produce quality content this time. But yeah, that's like I said, that's gonna do it for us this episode. And like always, be kind, stay geeky, and eat lots of cheesecake. Bye. Okay, third time's the charm.
Yes. The teeth, the tongue, the tip of the throat. No, wait. The teeth shit.
Teeth, the tongue, the tip of the lips. Or I don't think that's even right. Did
The,
I just fuck this up too?
the
tip of the tongue, the teeth, and
Teeth,
the
the
lips.
lips, the tip of the tongue, I think. Are
Tip
we
of the
dumb,
tongue.
David? Are we stupid?
I, I think this quarantine bullshit has like
Oh my
turned my
god.
brain into goddamn mashed potatoes and gravy.
To be
It's
fair,
it already was kind of like that.
yeah, a little bit, but that's alright.
You know what? I am not going to fight you on that.
Mhm.
Uh,
Good.
because it's because it's true.